assault scandals in a New Zealand school has finally been lifted. This is how many boys are found to have been abused at Auckland's Dilworth School, 175, and it's believed that number's likely to be higher. An independent inquiry led by Dame Sylvia Cartwright engaged with 681 people to produce its final report. It's found the school suppressed abuse, silenced victims and enabled the sex criminals. Dilworth was established in the early 1900s to provide an education for underprivileged boys to give them a better future. But instead, many were abused. Offending happened under former headmasters dating back to 1950, the most recent allegation in 2018. In each era of the school's leadership, complaints were made, but nothing changed. Instead, the inquiries found Dilworth's response to sex crimes was driven by a desire to protect its reputation and finances.
Welcome to the Dilworth Survivors Advocates Roundtable. I'm Greg Evans, your host of today's roundtable. Welcome back, advocates. Neil Harding.
Hello, good evening.
Steve Brown.
Evening all.
Mark Hepburn.
Team, how are you all?
Today, the survivor advocates are going to give their opinions on the Dilworth Redress program. We're going to look at 8 areas of the program. The Redress Caps, is the program survivor-led? The Redress Panel, what's not covered by the program? Offer review process, survivor support through the process, redress settlement agreement, full and final, and the Anglican Church. Because the government redress program for state and faith-based child abuse is so bad, it makes the Dilworth redress program look exceptionally good. We will show you here today that the Dilworth redress program is not what it's perceived. First of all, let's have a look at the financial caps. The program has 2 financial caps, $200,000, which is expected to be the maximum amount payable for most claims, and in extraordinary circumstances up to $300,000. Let's first have a look at the primary financial cap of $200,000. This is less than the Australian National Redress Scheme for Child Sexual Abuse of $150,000, which commenced in 2018. Let's take a quick look at an overview of the scheme.
The National Redress Scheme. For people who have experienced institutional child sexual abuse. In 2017, thousands of survivors spoke to a Royal Commission about their experiences of institutional child sexual abuse. Afterwards, the Commission made some recommendations about what should be done. One of these recommendations was the National Redress Scheme. This is one way of recognising the impact of child sexual abuse. So far, hundreds of institutions where child sexual abuse occurred have signed up and contributed financially. These include schools, churches, detention centres, hospitals, sports and recreation groups, foster care providers, and other institutions. The National Redress Scheme offers survivors 3 things. A payment of up to $150,000 to recognise the suffering you experienced. Access to counselling. A direct personal response or an apology from the institution. You can request any or all of these things.
The Australian National Redress Cap of $150,000 introduced in 2018 in today's money is $193,000. If we convert that to New Zealand dollars, it's $221,000, which is $21,000 more than the Dilworth Redress Program cap of $200,000. What's happening, because the New Zealand government can't even match the Australian government's redress scheme, it's making Dilworth's scheme look very favourable. Let's now have a look at the $300,000 cap in extraordinary circumstances. For a start, no one actually knows what exactly amounts to extraordinary circumstances. What I do know is my own case. 20 years after I left Dilworth, an ear, nose, and throat specialist told me I was breathing through one side of my nose and I needed an operation to fix that broken nose. I never knew I had, which could only have happened with an impact to my face and nose. I also found out later in life I have partial blindness in my left eye, which again could have only happened from an impact to the face-eye area. I was bashed to unconsciousness by a senior when I was a junior. I also had several sexual assaults along with being tortured by a pedophile. What I do know is these assaults never mounted to extraordinary circumstances under the Dilworth Redress scheme. In fact, the offer I received never even came close to the Australian Redress Cap. Neil, you have had an offer of redress from Dilworth. Did you get offered at least the equivalent of the National Australian Redress Cap?
No, I got offered significantly less. The interesting thing around that, Greg, is that there's massive inconsistencies with the awards that I've seen. I haven't been privy to many disclosures of what awards have been, but I was trafficked by my housemaster to the scoutmaster. I was molested by the minister. I was being groomed by the choir master, who's now in prison. I was being I had a sadistic tutor that was caning me, and guys that had one incident that didn't seem to even measure up to any of those seemed to get offered more than I did. And what concerned me more was a boy that had a severe sexual assault got offered significantly less than me. And so in terms of that, the absence of any kind of explanation of awards, the absence of any kind of matrix is difficult to really fathom. And also the fact that the impact of abuse seems to be fairly arbitrary. And it certainly doesn't make any sense as far as I'm concerned.
The offers lack consistency between.
Well, that's a big concern, and so you'd have to ask questions of moderation, which we'll probably cover further on tonight.
Okay, thanks, Neil. Mark, what's your thoughts on the redress caps?
If they're not prepared to disclose the framework or the process to which they come to the award amounts and be able to give examples of hypothetical examples of what one would expect depending on a particular situation or range of situations, then we don't know what we're dealing with. I am always deeply suspicious, skeptical, cynical of anybody or any organization that refuses to provide any clarity or any substance with how they're proceeding and how they're administering things. I think they have deliberately obfuscated, and I would suspect, and this is just my opinion, that I don't think these awards have necessarily been made on the life experience and the impact that have been on people's lives. I think the assessments appear to have been made on the basis of how much legal jeopardy do we have, and they will frame up an award based on what they see coming at them.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Steve, what's your opinion on the redress caps?
Well, I never believed in a cap. I've always believed in transparency in the process, that any survivor or victim should be entitled to know how the Redress Panel came up with that determination. Transparency is a fundamental principle of justice, and we don't have that. So, given how many survivors that I've spoken with, how many settlements I've heard, there is a huge variance at times. And if you say, let's just pick two areas. So the type of abuse, whether it's minor grooming to rape on a 1 to 10 scale, and the impact of no impact on a person's life as to massive impact beyond all measure is a 10. We don't know how they came up with it. There's no transparency in this process. So not only do I not agree with a cap, you either had two systems, and this has been bandied around with survivors where everybody gets the same amount no matter what, and there would be some who would feel disadvantaged. Or you go the other way and everybody's is individualized. That's fine, because there are some people who have massively suffered and they're just getting the same as somebody else who would not have had the degree of abuse. The other thing about it is this process has not been survivor focused. It hasn't been survivor led. And the worst bit of it, and I'm probably jumping a little bit here, is the fact that when you sign that piece of paper, you're excluding anything else in your life. You're saying, I will never touch Dilworth again. I'll never go for any more. And yet there are things that for example, peer-on-peer abuse is not covered. If you put it in your statement, they put that in your settlement. So it's automatically they're saying this redress payment covers that, but actually it doesn't cover that. Mm. So I feel, I don't think it's right, but we'll discuss that further.
No worries. Thanks, Steve. Okay, now let's have a look at the next point. Is the Dilworth Redress program a survivor-led program? Neil, you attempted to get the Dilworth Trust Board to have a survivor-led redress program. How did that work out?
Yeah, well, in April 2018, I initially sent a report to the Trust Board, offering collaboration twice. Further to that, I sent them a document engaging sensitively with survivors of abuse, which was produced by following the Australian Royal Commission by the New South Wales government, and they basically ignored collaboration. To the point that they were confusing consultation with collaboration. But in the end, as soon as I formed the class action, it became a combative process, not a collaborative process. And there's a couple of things I wouldn't mind sharing in relation to this. It's from this engaging sensitively with survivors abuse document. Collaborating with survivors and survivor organisations can build trust and understanding and provide valuable insights to improve safeguarding practices and policies. You should actively seek input about how to create more supportive and informed faith environments, as well as how to build strategic partnerships with survivor advocates and leaders. A primary motivation for many survivors telling faith organisations about their experiences in childhood is to try to ensure that no other child experiences the harm they did. Many survivors are passionate about changing systems and practices to improve child safety and will work with you to drive positive change. That was where I was coming from the outset. So it's not that they have been ignorant of this. They have actively not wanted to do this. There's another bit in here that I found quite relevant, which is the reason, what I'm reading out here is what I read that really impacted on me and how important it was for them to look and follow this document. Collaboration and mutuality, recognizing that abuse of power is paramount in the deliberate harm of children, organizations should critically examine their role in creating and maintaining power relationships. They should seek to reverse them by identifying and balancing power differences to recognize the value and contributions of survivors. Empowering children in organization helps to prevent the ongoing misuse of power relationships. And that basically says it all, is that they have pretty much middle fingered us. When we talk about collaboration, have they wanted to collaborate with me? As a survivor advocate leading a class action of 150 survivors, Steve Brown representing a whole lot of survivors as the welfare officer of the Old Boys Association, and then the president of the Old Boys Association attending all of the court hearings. Not only were we not invited, we were expressly refused to be part of collaboration. Not only did they not do it, they refused to collaborate with Steve and myself. And so, you know, is that healing? Is that appropriate? Is that best practice? As far as I'm concerned, it's pretty reprehensible that they would treat us this way when we only want what's best for the school. We only want what's best to create safety for children. That's what's driven me. That's my biggest motivator, is if I can help other kids not have what happened to me, then that gives my experience, transforms my trauma into something of that has meaning.
They actually confessed, Aaron Snodgrass at the Royal Commission stated we could have done better when it came to collaboration with the victims of abuse. Well, you know, the class action opened them up. It's not too late to join our waka, but they still won't join it. You know?
No, they will bar us. They're barring us. They're picking and choosing the people they will collaborate with.
That's right.
Or when you meet with them, they smile, they listen with one ear, and nothing changes. No matter what you put to them, nothing changes. I have another meeting scheduled with Mr. Mason in a couple of weeks, and I suspect that I'm wasting my time. But once again, I'll go with an open mind and in a spirit of collaboration to advance the cause of survivors, in the hope that he may listen and change an appalling power constructed process instead, and listen to it and put survivors at the heart of it.
Well, we're hopeful, Steve. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Neil, for your comment on that. Mark, you attempted to get the DTB or the Dilworth Trust Board to have a survivor-led redress program. How did that work out for you, Mark?
Well, I think after the independent report and the extensive proposal that me and myself and another survivor put forward, I think the trust board had got to the point where they realized they had to do something. The fundamental basis of a collaborative effort to heal the community, which was also going to include inputs around redress, was to be survivor-led. At every single point, without exception, and I stress without exception, this was board controlled. It was not survivor-led. We simply weren't listened to, and they weren't interested in taking the lead or letting the survivors or the survivor group actually have the lead. Anything that may have ended up being legally compromising for them, they shut it down. And the way they shut it down was not outright shut it down, was delay, divert, and obfuscate. A case in point that would be, and I know this doesn't directly speak to redress, but I first raised with them in June of 2024, June last year, that we weren't going to get survivor engagement and collaboration until the trust board publicly apologised. it took them 6 months to even accept they needed to apologize. And even then, the shape of the apology was entirely controlled and outlined by the trust board. The survivors were simply not listened to. What you got on apology day was a whole lot of window dressing and board manufactured controlling of the narrative. And that was it.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Steve, you have been looking closely at the redress program of the Presbyterian Church, which I understand is a good example of a survivor-led redress program.
Yeah, I'd like to read a couple of comments that have been recently put out by people who were at that apology. And this woman wrote, I was impressed with their honesty, their willingness to admit their failures and commit publicly to protecting those who speak out. Now, that didn't happen to some of us. To ensure survivors that take the lead in shaping their respective redress process, to continue engaging with an independent auditor. Dilworth doesn't have an independent auditor, to ensure they're held accountable. The Presbyterian Church spokesman said, we commit to ensuring abusers, enablers, and others who have harmed survivors are held fully accountable. It hasn't happened at Dilworth. Comment was written. At that moment, a covenant was made in public and on record that the church that had harmed us would make those responsible and answerable for their actions. Survivors seeking justice won't have to fight alone. We have been fighting to have those who ran the school, ran the trust board, held to account. There are sexual abusers still floating around, and has Dilworth gone to the police and publicly supported us? I don't believe so. They admitted when the institution began developing a journey of developing a redress scheme, its approach was church-led, thinking it knew better than the people it harmed. They established a survivor group, advisory group. The survivors in it confronted us with the truth. They asked a revealing question. Who is this redress for? Is it for the church to feel satisfied that they had ticked a box, or is it truly for survivors? Did Dilworth have a survivor advisory group for their redress scheme? I don't believe so. This is a really well thought out the comments from the survivor is just from the Presbyterian Church is just so different to Dilworth's. You know, I have faith that they may not get the same amount of redress as we have. They may get more, who knows? But it's transparent. It's survivor-led. It's survivor-driven, and the church is saying, we will have an independent auditor. We don't have that for our survivors, for our redress process. There is no one you can appeal to.
And Steve, does the Presbyterian Church have a review of the offer process?
It would appear so, because they've talked about this independent auditor. Yeah. So I suspect that is what will happen. You know, it's all about, as Neil has said, and Mark, it's all about hearing from survivors, which is not what we've experienced. So different. And they waited. Sorry, Mark.
And yet they will claim that they are actually collaborating with survivors, which is true. They are collaborating with some survivors, and I wish all the best for my Dilworth brothers. But the group of survivors that they are currently collaborating with, the trust board is running rings around them.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, they don't have the.
I don't think they have the right to exclude survivor advocates. I really don't think they have that right.
No, I agree with that, Neil.
It's too difficult for the current trust board to have the four guys that are in this podcast sitting across the table from them, because unfortunately, we're going to ask all the hard, the right, the correct, and the doing the right thing questions, and they don't want to hear that.
Mm. All right. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, guys. Next point, the redress panel. The Dilworth Redress program is managed independently of Dilworth with determinations made by an independent panel of 3 experienced professionals. Dame Judith Potter, Chair, former High Court Judge, Professor Ian Lambie, clinical psychologist, and Ruku Moana Shavulson, I hope I pronounced that right, governance expert. These 3 independent panel members together consider the applications of former students who have been abused and determine their applications for redress. Neil, I understand you went before the redress panel. How did that work out for you?
It was very distressing, very traumatizing. I first got there and my lawyer wasn't present, so I asked a support person to come with me to take notes so I could present them to my lawyer, because I was feeling vulnerable and I just felt like I wanted someone to take notes for me. So when she brought her notebook out, Dame Judith Potter just put that away. There'll be no notes taken in this meeting. It's private and confidential. And I said, in fairness, I'm feeling vulnerable. I explained it. She said, I'm sure you'll remember everything, Mr. Harding. And that was the beginning of the meeting. And then it went into we then went into, was it a karakia or a process? And the energy in the room was so dark, it never recovered. Then I was basically torn strips off. Why am I here? Because I was asking questions. I said, before I start this process, I need to know I'm not going to be worse off after it than before I entered it. And these are some of the concerns I have. I have concerns about the question of moderation. There isn't any. James Judith Potter said to me. A complaints process. There isn't one. You have a choice whether you're here or not. So everything, it was just bang, boom, back at me. And then it was like, well, we're administering Dilworth's scheme. If you've got a problem, go and speak to them. Why are you here? And I said, well, for my personal redress. And it's like, yeah, but why are you here? And I said, well, what's my alternative? And they said, the class action. And I left in tears about sort of 10, 15 minutes through it. I went outside, I was crying in the street. No one came to see I was okay. They saw I was upset. No one organised the taxi home for me that they were going to do. And no one has ever contacted me since to see that I'm okay. And that was my personal redress. Now, it seems that I was an enemy of an independent redress panel before I even entered that room. And I don't know how I could be seen as an enemy to an independent redress panel. I'm still a little bit baffled, but I was completely unprepared for that. I was completely blindsided. I thought that I was going to be given compassion and respect, humility, the things I expected that I was going to have at my own personal redress meeting. I didn't get. I got the opposite, and I got treated as if I was some enemy of the process.
Would you say that perhaps they were deliberately trying to put you off your arguments, that you lost where you're at, and that way the whole thing?
It was definitely designed to unsettle me. The way that my support person was treated, put your notebook away, you're not allowed to take notes. I mean, seriously, how can that be appropriate that notes are not allowed to be taken by us? Who is it for her to say that meeting is private and confidential? It's my meeting. It's my redress. Who is she to shoot down my support person?
Yeah.
And I can only imagine that it was designed to rattle me and to without getting paranoid. But, look, I'd been vocal leading up in the media. I'd been vocal about the concerns I had with the redress program, that it was not best practice, and they must have seen that and they didn't like it. So they decided to make an example of it, or tell me to go away and go through the redress panel.
Thank you, Neil, for giving us that. Mark, I understand you also went before the redress panel. How did that work out for you?
Before I even turned up, I was informed that meeting with the redress panel was as a courtesy only, and it had no bearing on the outcome of whatever award I might receive. And my actual meeting, which I had my support person and my lawyer along, which incidentally, Neil, my lawyer was allowed to take notes. I was told up front, as Neil was, that they had no control. They were just there to administer the scheme. And if I had any problems with that, then I needed to talk about it with the trust board, of which, when I raised with the trust board on numerous occasions after that, the trust board said, oh, our hands are tied. It's completely independent. So this is just the trust board doing their usual diversion and abrogation of accountability and responsibility. But I also raised with the trust board my distinct experience, and without giving any other names away, a number of other guys' experiences that they had with Judith Potter. I wonder if Judith is suitable for that role, because it's clear that she had modelled herself on Dorian Gray any number of times to be able to be there, a completely soulless, heartless, cutting, aggressive, ugly person. And I had conveyed that to the trust board on numerous occasions, and that there were numerous people that had that experience, and the trust board's response to all of this was, oh, well, it's too late to change it now. The trust board don't give a rat's ass. They have a framework. That's it. There is no negotiation. We don't care how it plays out. The redress process is simply a corporate window dressing exercise in an attempt to make it look as though they're curing trauma by writing a check and getting rid of their legal liability. That's it. End of story. Everything else is window dressing. However, there was one positive note through going through that redress process, and I want to be on record for this. The facilitators, who had to wear so much rubbish from survivors and work under the draconian framework that the trust board actually allowed them to work under, those facilitators, they all deserve medals. They were just absolutely amazing people who had empathy, who had heart, and had their hands tied behind their back and were expected to hang wallpaper at the same time. My hat tip to them, and my heart goes out to them for what they had to endure.
Yeah, I concur with that as well.
Yeah. Or at least one part of the program's okay.
Yeah. Well.
Oh, thanks, Mark, for sharing that with us. I have also been before the redress panel, and for me, I found it very confrontational. The meeting first started with why Steve Brown was my support person and my listed support person wasn't attending. I had a supporting document which my facilitator suggested I hand to the panel when I meet with them. The panel refused me to table the document. The document, A Blow to Humanity, Torture by Judicial Caning in Malaysia, demonstrates that what happened to me at Dilworth is considered torture today. 30 minutes into my presentation, Dame Potter asked if I was going to be much longer as they have limited time. This totally put me off my thinking and presentation. I ended the presentation at that point. Steve, you were at my meeting with the panel. You have also supported other survivors to go before the redress panel. Do you think the panel treated me the same as the other survivors you attended the panel with?
No, simply no. It had, as Neil described, it had quite a negative atmosphere that day. We came out of that meeting quite stunned. I was there as your support person. No, I've seen other survivors be treated differently. I also want to pick up on a point that Neil made. When I went to one of the first meetings, I hadn't been before the panel, and I got out a piece of paper and I started to write down the names of the people on the panel because I didn't know who they were. And I was hauled across the coals for just writing down their names. No notes taken. But the interesting thing is, and I've observed this on a number of times at the redress panel hearings, is that Potter, on numerous occasions, has been making notes on people's files. So they say that the process has already been predetermined before we get there. It's your opportunity to be heard, but they shut you down. You can't, and if it's for us to be heard, then we shouldn't be limited. You know, why is there only so much time given? We should be allowed as much time as we need. This is for us to have our say. So, no, I don't think the process that you endured was the same as other people's. It sounds like it was very similar to Neil's. It's not the same as I saw other survivors be treated. Yes.
Disappointing. Oh, thanks for sharing that, Steve. Next point, what's not covered by the program? Peer-on-peer serious physical abuse is not covered in the redress program. What's interesting is Aaron Snodgrass at the Abuse and Care Royal Commission of Inquiry stated he was looking for the Royal Commission opinion on peer-on-peer severe physical abuse. Here is a clip of the conversation at the Royal Commission.
When you create your redress program, obviously you have to determine its boundaries, and I asked him what his views were about whether they were he's happy with the scope of the redress program, and so I wanted to ask you too about whether, for example, that on-peer abuse is limited to sexual abuse and doesn't include physical abuse, and I'm just wondering where you are with that, because it seems that there's still scope for revisiting these fundamental questions of scope.
Well, I think that the redress program and the scope of it has been determined. Of course, we're open to getting feedback on it, and I note that Dr. Walton hadn't had a chance to fully review the redress terms. But let me tell you about how we've got to where we've got to. The redress program started off as redress for survivors.
I don't mean sorry. It's just the question of time for today. We're really compressed, and so my question is really: are you satisfied with the scope as it presently is, or do you still have some questions in your mind about whether it could be broader? To exclude physical abuse will actually include serious forms of physical abuse in your program. So. Just want your views on that, please, Mr. Snodgrass.
Precisely.
Yeah.
All forms of abuse from a staff member to a student is covered in the program. Boy-on-boy sexual abuse, if it was known by the school and not acted upon, is covered in the program. What's not covered in the program is boy-on-boy physical abuse. We colloquially call that bullying. We believe that's a wider societal issue that is difficult for us to consider in this program. And so we are looking to a wider discussion, hopefully through this commission, about how we might deal with the effects of bullying on people, but we are not covering that in the program.
Okay, thank you for your answer, mate. Thank you.
The Royal Commission made a decision on peer-on-peer severe physical abuse and advised it should be included in any redress program. Here is what they said.
The Abuse and Care Royal Commission of Inquiry report recommends that the new redress scheme should cover peer-on-peer abuse, including severe physical abuse that occurred in state or faith-based care settings.
Consequently, the New Zealand Abuse and Care Redress Program covers peer-on-peer severe physical abuse.
The New Zealand Government Redress Scheme covers severe physical abuse, including peer-on-peer abuse, provided it occurred within the care setting.
The Dilworth Independent Inquiry report was published showing the failures of the DTB, resulting in an environment where peer-on-peer serious physical abuse was allowed to thrive. The failures were insufficient staff in the houses, empowering seniors with the same powers as staff over juniors, no policies and procedures for reporting abuse. The school management supported the code of silence and ignored legal advice. Even after the Dilworth Independent Inquiry shows the management failings regarding peer-on-peer severe physical abuse, and the Royal Commission recommends peer-on-peer severe physical abuse should be included in any redress program, and the Government Abuse and Care Redress Program covers severe peer-on-peer physical abuse, the Dilworth Trust Board still refused to acknowledge the victims on peer-on-peer severe physical abuse in the redress program. We estimate the Dilworth Trust Board profited by $180 million over the past 7 decades by not providing sufficient staff to provide a safe environment. The $180 million estimate is based on the increase of 40 staff costing $3 million per annum to make the school safe today. This is known as disgorgement. Here is a short video clip on disgorgement.
What is disgorgement? Disgorgement is where a big claw or hand comes in essentially and grabs something and pulls it to a new person or entity. So I just visualize this big claw reaching in and grabbing money and anything else that is authorized as part of a disgorgement. So here's the scenario where it comes up. Let's say you have a business owner who owns a business with her partner. Both of these two business owners are working together on the business. Things are going great. But then one of the owners says, you know what? I'm going to start a side business that competes with the business we own together. And for one of these big potential customers I've been talking to, instead of having that customer go into our shared business where I'd only get half the profits, I'm going to have that big customer go into my other business. That business that's competing with our shared business. Because that way, she'll get all of the profits from that big customer. Well, you can't do that. That's a breach of the fiduciary duty of loyalty. All business owners owe a duty of loyalty, a duty not to compete with each other and with their business. So, if the business partner who was innocent decides to sue, a court could rule not only does the bad business owner owe the money, but any profits that were generated in that other business owned by only the bad business owner will be disgorged and brought to the partnership. So that's an example of disgorgement in real life. It's when a court orders that another company, and a company that might not even be a party to the case in rare circumstances, must disgorge those profits and bring them back because they were illegally in that other entity or wrongfully in that other entity. So what is disgorgement? It's simply when a court or some other authority grabs assets, often money, funds, and moves it to another entity. Another example of disgorgement is when a bankruptcy trustee finds money that was improperly transferred from a person who filed for bankruptcy to another person or entity. The bankruptcy trustee can reach out and disgorge those funds and bring it back into the bankruptcy estate to be used for the creditors of the estate.
The Dilworth Trust Board should use those ill-gotten gains of 180 million to pay the victims of peer-on-peer severe physical abuse who suffered for profit. What's your thoughts, Steve, on the Dilworth Trust Board ignoring the Royal Commission recommendations and the government covering peer-on-peer severe physical abuse in the Abuse and Care Redress Program?
I'm appalled. I'm appalled, and also on Aaron's comments that they were waiting for, it was a society problem. Royal Commission identified it wasn't just a society problem. And at Dilworth, we were ring-fenced. Dilworth didn't allow the bullies into school. The bullies were in the boarding house in the morning. They followed you to school, and they followed you back to the boarding house at night. And some of them even went between boarding houses and beat other boys up at different times and sexually assaulted. You cannot ignore that. And what's worse in the Dilworth redress process is that when you put in your claim, you are excluded from any other claim once you've taken redress. And that includes peer on peer. That's not right. People are having to take redress or they take it under duress. Duress of the conditions, duress of financial pressures, duress because they cannot cope with Dilworth and the process any longer. It's wrong, morally and ethically wrong.
Thanks, Steve. Mark, what's your opinion on Dilworth not covering peer-on-peer severe physical abuse in their redress program?
They had a duty of care. They were essentially parentis locus, and to not provide a sufficient framework to make sure that everybody was safe, at the bare minimum protected, is an abject failure of duty and responsibility. A reasonable degree, my own experience was that I was able to weave my way through all the, but certainly I came under attack from bullies, and I do remember one severe beating I got from another person, but that's really rather irrelevant at this point. It's the point is they didn't provide a safe environment, and they should be held responsible and liable for that.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for sharing, Mark. Neil, what's your thoughts on peer-on-peer?
Well, pretty much what I was going to say is exactly what Mark has just said. The thing I'll add to that is if you read the Dilworth Independent Inquiry, if you can stomach it, you will see the horrific treatment that those boys received through Dilworth's failure in their duty of care responsibilities. And so for them to basically ignore their own report is very inappropriate, and it's offensive. It's unjust that they, when they're reading that, what are they reading? If they've read it, have they read it? If they've read it, it doesn't seem to have affected them at all or made them think that those kinds of experiences are not going to have some kind of impact. And so...
Yeah, but Neil, you're actually dealing with people who've had an empathy bypass at birth. This whole process has been nothing but a legal window dressing exercise to get people to get the liabilities off their books. Their last concern is ever going to be about the ethical or the emotional status or the emotional safety requirements of their charges. They're simply not interested.
No.
Yeah.
And that you just have to ask them the moral compass, their lack of compassion and ability to actually care about a large cohort of boys who were severely traumatized. The care factor is, and it comes back again to that thing I read before about recognizing the empower imbalance and how these behaviors can be so damaging to healing and to the process when you continue to be voiceless, continue to be worthless, and your life is meaningless. Your experiences and your traumas are meaningless because they don't care. They're not even going to pay it out. They're not going to cover it, but then they're going to pay you, and you're not allowed to ever get anything for that. It's just wrong. It's just morally wrong.
And Neil, I think your point is incredibly on point, that the power imbalance that existed then still exists now. They may claim that they have a new framework at the faculty, and that in actual fact may be the case. But the way in which we were treated under that power imbalance when we were at the school, they are treating us exactly the same way again and again. And I know that they don't give a toss, but it has been re-traumatizing for most survivors to actually go through it, because again, your experience, Steve's experience, Greg's experience, my experience, and trying to get these guys to come across the table and actually even pretend that they're trying to be human has been excruciating. These guys are simply not interested. They've got the checkbook. That's all they care about, is covering their liability. And they'll happily use that checkbook as part of their power imbalance to be able to square that liability off their books.
They bloody basically comes back to they're incompetent. They designed this redress program before the Royal Commission report came out, before the inquiry report came out, before the government scheme came out, and they basically got it underway. They used the excuse that this was because boys needed the money and were in stretched circumstances, that they wanted to get a scheme up and running as soon as possible. But the truth of the matter is they never actually paid anybody until after the inquiry report came out anyway. And what they've failed to do is to revisit the program and say, after the Royal Commission report, the inquiry report, the Dilworth, the government redress scheme, to say, does it meet the requirements after all the information has come out? And they've basically not revisited the program since they introduced it. And of course, that's why the program fails, is because it was designed before they knew all the information. And that really just comes back to straight up incompetence of them and their designing this program and the whole scheme and how they've gone about everything.
I put that to Jonathan Mason when he was about to become the new incoming chair about all of these issues. He came back to me and said, yep, he's discussed it with the trust board and they stand by the integrity of the process, all elements of it, including the absence of a complaints process, of which I complained, but they said it's too late to bring one in now. So they basically have a stated position that they stand by all elements of the redress program.
Empathy.
Reptilian.
Empathy is a feeling, and they can pretend to be empathetic, but compassion is the action. There isn't the compassion there for us survivors.
All right.
I come back to the Presbyterian Church because I think what they've said so far, and they've made theirs public right from the start, is that it was survivor. They started as church-led and realised their mistake. Dilworth has been told, as you've heard, on numerous occasions by all of us, that they need to change their approach. And nothing has changed. It is still, we're the trust board. You do as you're told, or the door's there. Our way or the highway. I don't feel that I achieved anything whatsoever in my meeting. That's my second meeting. Previous to that was my meeting with Aaron Snodgrass when he guaranteed the listening service would continue for as long as it was needed. And what did they do? Oh, they wriggled out of that one too. Money.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Thanks, guys. We better move on to the next point. Survivor support through the redress process. The terms of reference for the redress program has a section in it which allowed support people from the inquiry, because they had built a relationship with survivors, to go on and support those survivors through the redress process. This is what section 17 of the terms of reference says.
If the survivor has engaged in the inquiry, they will be entitled to have access to and contact with the same support person for both the inquiry and redress program.
The Dilworth Trust Board ignored that section and laid off all the support staff at the end of the inquiry. Going before the inquiry and the redress panel can be confronting for victims of abuse. You can have anxiety and anticipation prior to the meeting. I found the support people of the inquiry showed real compassion and made you feel welcome and comfortable. The support people at the panel did not show compassion and did not make you feel welcome and comfortable. Neil, what's your opinion on the redress support people?
Well, I was at the Royal Commission, and the two of the support people I had at the Royal Commission when I spoke at the public hearing were people that were support people at the independent inquiry. And we pushed very hard with a class action to have that continuation of those people, because that transition, of having first spoken to the police, spoken to the Royal Commission, spoken to an independent inquiry, now speaking to a redress panel, you're going through a process and regurgitating your childhood traumas. Having the continuation of the same support people is really important. And for us to have been denied that opportunity, when I know those support people would have been prepared to do it, is again an example of how this is not best practice. If anything, it's just a middle finger to us.
And they failed to consult with the
They failed to
survivors.
consider our needs. They failed to listen to us. We pointed it out to them early, and they just said, "No."
No, well, what's amazing is they put it in the redress scheme. It was there for the inquiry support people to be able to support us through the redress process. They just cut that off, sacked those people from there after they finished the inquiry, and didn't apologise to the victims of abuse that we've decided not to allow the support people to come across and support you through the redress program. There was no apology, no consultation about it. They just did it and didn't care.
I raised that with Aaron Snodgrass about keeping on one of the leading support people from the inquiry, and he flatly refused. I had it in my meeting notes, and he said no. The people at the Dilworth Redress Panel would take over. From my experience, the first person that was there who kind of welcomed you in a bit was quite friendly. The subsequent person who's been there to the other hearings that I've been to has no idea. As far as I know, there's no follow-up phone call. If someone's had a follow-up phone call, it's I would be surprised to hear. It's supposed to be we needed the same people that we had developed a rapport, a relationship with, to be available to us. And the DTB, once again, thinking of money, excluded them. And would it have cost that much when you already had the structure in place? This could have been a seamless process between the Dilworth inquiry and the redress panel. Very simple, all done, one document passed over from the Dilworth inquiry to the redress panel. They ticked the boxes, they worked through the exercise, and it was finished. And the support people were still available if we needed it. Gone. Just like the listening service.
I can't see how it's about money. I can only see how it's about control, really. I just can't see how that they could justify that financially, because we still had to have someone.
Okay, thanks, Steve and Neil. Mark, what's your opinion on the redress support people?
Personally, on the redress support people that I dealt with.
Yeah. How would you compare them? Actually, I could see we're up for a good one here. How would you compare them with the inquiry support people?
My own experience was the inquiry support people. There's one lady in particular who I know you had a lot to do with, Greg. She was magnificent. And then the redress support people, the people that I dealt with in there, they were fantastic as well. But you know, that's what they were paid to do, and they're very good at doing what they're doing. Unfortunately, Dilworth didn't see fit to make sure they had the same sort of quality people at the other layers and levels that were required. You could almost cynically say, let's make sure that we get, it's like, let's get some good people in there so we can get this lot feeling comfortable and get them over the line with the pathetic offers we're going to make them.
Yeah, okay.
So, but the inquiry support people, yeah, during the inquiry, and then the support that I actually got, from that inquiry person was just magnificent. And she went the extra mile on a number of occasions for me.
Excellent. Okay. Thanks for sharing, Mark. Next and last point, redress review process. The DTB made claim at the Royal Commission that they looked at best practice overseas redress programs. The Australian National Redress Scheme for Child Sexual Abuse has a review process if you're not happy with your offer of redress. The Abuse and Care Royal Commission of Inquiry also recommends a review process in any redress program. Here is what they recommend.
The Abuse and Care Royal Commission of Inquiry recommended that redress offers should include a review process, as survivors reported that current processes lacked fairness and independence. The Commission's recommendations aim to establish a holistic redress system where offers can be reviewed, addressing survivor concerns about unclear calculations, inconsistencies, and the inability to challenge decisions without going to court.
So what does the government say about an offer review process?
The New Zealand Government's announcement in Budget 2025 includes a promise of an independent review for dissatisfied claimants in the revised abuse and care redress system.
So let's have a recap here on an offer review process. The Australian National Redress Scheme has one. The Abuse and Care Royal Commission of Inquiry recommends one. The New Zealand Government Abuse and Care Redress is going to have a review process. Mark, what's your opinion on why Dilworth doesn't have a review process if you don't agree with your offer when everyone else is offering a review process?
There's quite simply an imbalance of power, and they know they can get away with it. So they're just going to manage their financial and legal liabilities on that basis. They don't care about the people that were abused. I say it again and again and again, this is nothing but a window dressing exercise that they've been prepared to throw 50 million at to cover it all up. not to actually provide any healing. They've just made a decision to say, we'll put 50 million to the side, problem gone, moving on. Suicides, what are those?
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Mike.
Marriages, divorces, wrecked families, extended far now, all the damage that's been done in there. Not interested.
Thanks, Mark. Steve, what's your opinion on it? Not offering a review process, Dilworth not offering a review process when pretty much everyone else is.
I'm appalled. There's just no other word for it. It's appalling, you know. Even if you get sentenced in court, you have the right of appeal. And you can take that on a number of levels. You take it back to the court you're in, then you got court of appeal, then you've got the Supreme Court. We have nothing. And there's no transparency in what's happening to us in those settlement offers. I find that appalling.
Yeah.
That is not survivor-led. Thank goodness for the Presbyterian Church listening to survivors.
Okay, thanks for sharing, Steve. Neil, what's your thoughts on Dilworth not offering a review process to your offer?
I mean, I just think it's a real breach of natural justice. Can I share with you what the Anglican Church, the Archbishop of the Anglican Church wrote Dilworth recommendations on their redress scheme. Can I share those now? What those points were?
Yeah.
So the Archbishop said to Dilworth, the scheme needs to be driven by survivors and be survivor focused. That was a concern they had. The redress scheme is too narrow as it does not cover boy-on-boy abuse. There should be the ability to review a redress payment if further findings are made in the inquiry that might affect it. There should not be a cap on redress. The acceptance of any redress award should not be in full and final settlement. This clause is against the Royal Commission's report. So the Archbishop of the Anglican Church of New Zealand has given that feedback to Dilworth in terms of their redress scheme. And you can see that every one of those points has been ignored.
That's right. I mean, at the end of the day, you can sign an offer for redress and believe you've told them about everything that happened to you, but you can have repressed memories. I've had several repressed memories which have been brought back by other survivors reminding me of events or this that triggers because when you're a child, in order to move forward, the horrific events that have happened to you, you lock it up in the back of your brain so that you can move forward with life. And of course, what happens is a lot of survivors can't, and they turn to alcohol, drugs, and everything to cover up what's happened to them. But other people lock it up and hide it in their brain. And then, of course, this can be you've signed away your rights, and then all of a sudden you remember this horrific event that happened to you. Well, too bad. You can't come back and revisit it and say, hey, this, happened to me. And yeah, so. Okay.
I agree. I've actually had that's occurred to me with one of the Dilworth survivors. He's been through the process, severely damaged by the trauma that he experienced. He's worked through the abuse by the perpetrator staff member. He's got that one out the way. Now it's like, now I can deal with the older boy that molested me. And it's like, no, you can't. You can't go back. It's too late. So when you're looking at this, I think, when you're looking at it through the lens of a survivor, survivors are often really, really damaged. And when you look at research, international research about dealing with survivors, it's not just this one process fits all kind of scheme. It's got to be tailored.
Right.
And there's no tailoring to anything here. And they're just putting these lines in the sand in the wrong place and just saying, well, this is it.
Mm.
And they're their lines. And they're right. It's Dilworth's Redress Program. It's not the Dilworth Survivors Redress Program. They've named it Dilworth's Redress Program. And it is. For there to restore their reputation, to clean up the mess, treat us like we're asbestos, clean it up. Full and final means they don't want us back on the grounds because we're asbestos. We're this mess that, although they've said it's not our fault, they're not treating us as if it's not our fault.
Mm. Mm.
I've got a victim who handed his facilitator his police complaint about the person who abused him, but he didn't understand the process, and so therefore, in that redress process, he did not put in that he had been sexually abused by another boy at the school. When he tried to get it included, they said no. But when they wrote out his redress settlement offer, they included that abuse by the other boy in it, even though they would not allow him to include it to have it addressed.
All about not preventing him from coming back later to reclaim it, but they never bloody paid him for it.
And he got such a poor settlement offer, he would be one of those in the lowest band.
Unbelievable. All right. Thanks for sharing those, guys. Right, let's move on to the next point. Advocates, what's your opinion on what the Trust Board needs to do to make the existing redress program survivor-led and best practice? Neil?
I think they need to resign. I'm serious. I mean, they have just, their failures have been so sustained. I just don't know that their position is really tenable or recoverable. We can say, I'll turn around now and do survivor-led, but the trust, part of this thing is building trust.
That's right. Building trust with the victims.
And collaboration and mutuality is a trust process. There's no good faith. There has just been offensive and deliberate acts that completely undermine us, that I just can't see how it's repairable. I'd be interested in Mark and Steve and your opinion, Greg, but that's how I see it.
Yeah, I agree. And Steve, what's your thoughts on it?
Well, for starters, when I met with Jonathan Mason, I suggested to him that in order to make one change, which was to have transparency in the settlement office so that people knew what they were being offered and why. That would make a great deal of sense to survivors, but it wasn't listened to. Also made a suggestion on how to address some of the injustices of the process, how they could do a ex gratia goodwill payment to all boys. Again, nothing. You can't, we could say scrap the process, but it doesn't fix up what's wrong. It really needs to be rethought and reevaluated by an independent auditor, as well as the payments. And if they come up and they say, well, look, Dilworth, we think this is wrong, then Dilworth has to address it. Are we likely to get it?
No.
Yeah.
All right.
We
Thanks,
can only
Steve.
keep speaking out.
That's right. Or get them in court.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Mark, What's your thoughts on what the Trust Board needs to do to make the existing redress program survivor-led and best practice?
First, they need to find some pretty good definition on what leadership's all about. If they're willing to listen to some of us, we can score them about 1 or 2 out of 10 as to what leadership truly is. Second, they need to have extensive counselling so that they can deeply understand what the clinical description of sociopathy is all about, because almost to a person, these guys are demonstrating sociopathic behavior. Once they understand that, they can be admitted to have their empathy bypasses, which they've clearly had since birth, undone. And only then a little bit of public humiliation and a public flogging would be in order before they sign their resignations in their own blood. As far as I'm concerned, and I'm being brutal here, the whole lot of them can
Thank you.
Neil is being inordinately polite by saying they need to resign.
Thanks, Mark, for sharing with us your opinion. Well done, guys. Look, next point, redress settlement agreement, full and final. Now let's take a look at the redress settlement agreement. If a survivor has a claim of sexual abuse and a claim of peer-on-peer severe physical abuse and he chooses to accept the redress offer, under the settlement agreement, the survivor has to sign away any future right to claim peer-on-peer severe physical abuse, even though it's not included in the redress offer. Here is exactly what the agreement says.
2. Full release. Upon receipt of the redress payment, the survivor unconditionally and irrevocably waives, releases and discharges each and every claim, right of any kind, cause of action or any suit whatsoever that he may have, either alone or together with any other person, and whether or not presently known about, against the board and all or any of the persons or entities specified and in relation to the abuse suffered by the survivor.
Advocates, what's your opinion on having to sign your rights away to claim in the future peer-on-peer severe physical abuse when it's not included in your redress offer? Mark.
I think the fact that you have to sign away any of your rights, regardless of what that claim might be into the future, is absolutely appalling. If you wanted to have a redress scheme that signed away all of your rights, regardless of the claims into the future, then design a redress scheme that caters for exactly that. What you've done is put it under the auspices of sexual abuse and left it there. But at the same time, we're going to dangle this carrot in front of you so that you don't have any claims against us into the future, not only against the trust board, but against any ex-employees, current employees, ex-trustees, current trustees. It's a neat little scheme to make sure that we're going to protect the enablers. That's why it's there. And the enablers in this situation aren't just some of the people that were at the school, but they are also some of the past trustees.
That's another.
It's a neat little scheme to cover their asses, regardless of what legal jeopardy they may face into the future. And they're punishing us by dangling a check in front of us to get there. Yeah. Remember, this is a window dressing, liability, ass covering exercise. That's it. This is not about doing the right thing.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark. Steve, what's your thoughts on signing your rights away to claim later, even though you're not getting paid in your redress of a severe physical abuse?
I'm appalled. Absolutely appalled. You know, this is supposed to be a Christian school with Christian values and ethics. Are they practicing what they preach or what they're supposed to adhere to? Is this being done with Christian love? I'm just the school that I once held in such high esteem.
Yeah.
Couldn't be lower.
Yeah.
And it relates to the scumbags who run the entity who have let us down.
I think we're getting to the point where the current board is no different to the previous boards that made all the mistakes in the inquiry report. What do you guys reckon?
I think that's a fair assessment. The only thing is they're a bit more polished at their PR than what they were in the day of Cotter and Firth.
If it looks like a duck, it's yellow, walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's a duck. It ain't a goose.
All right. Actually, I forgot to, Neil, your opinion on signing your rights away on peer severe physical abuse when it's not included in the redress offer.
Well, you'd have to, when you look at, if Dilworth were genuine about an offer, why would they have to full and final it?
Mm.
If they felt that this offer was the best offer, why would they need to put a full and final clause? Because what you've got to look at is the full and final clause is actually in breach of the trust deed. That they're actually restricting, preventing a trustee in the future from supporting an old boy, which is expressly against the trust deed. So you're going, it's again, it's what it comes back to. What's their motivation? And their motivation is to make the problem go away. And as I've said, the metaphor is asbestos. You know, we are a mess that needs cleaning up. They don't want us back on the ground because a full and final is like, here you go away. It's not, you are the blood of the school, you are family of the school, you are its heritage, you are the school. You are something that needs removing. And full and final is very much about, as I've said before, they may as well give us a trespass notice with it because that's how it feels.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Neil. Now, Neil, do we still want to do this Anglican Church, or have you already?
No, I've pretty much covered what
Yeah.
they've said. And in terms
Right.
of the Anglican Church, you can see that the things that the Archbishop of New
Yeah.
Zealand, the head of the Anglican Church in New Zealand, has recommended to Dilworth, bearing in mind he only has visitor status. Dilworth don't have to listen to him. And you're going, how can that institution not listen to the overarching Archbishop of the Anglican Church of New Zealand and completely ignore the recommendations, which are consistent with what our Survey Monkey that we did to survivors that we presented to Dilworth through the class action and gave our feedback on redress. And where are the Anglican Church in this? Where are they saying, hey guys, why have you not listened to us? They've just sat back and let us experience being re-traumatized, and they've done nothing.
Yeah.
Because they can't. Apparently, it's just they have visitor status. You know, they have no power, and it's like that's too convenient, and it's not good enough.
Yeah.
I also raised it with the Archbishop about speaking out, about holding Dilworth to account. It's just not good enough.
Okay. Thanks, Neil and Steve. Okay, advocates, let's vote on the current Dilworth Redress program. Now, I've got 1 out of 5. 1 is excellent, life-changing, and survivor-focused. Well, I don't think any of us are going to be voting 1. 2, good, lacking in a few areas, but generally good. 3, okay, lacking in a lot of areas. 4, bad, most survivors are disappointed with the redress program. 5, Disastrous. The Trust Board is still focused on the school's reputation and is only doing the bare minimum they think they can get away with in the court of public opinion when it comes to a redress program. Okay, Steve, what's your thoughts? What do you give it? 1 to 5?
It's definitely not a 1. It's not a 2. I think most survivors, and I've got to go on survivors, would be between a 3.5 and a 5. Realistically, it's about a 3.5 to a 4.5, and most would probably fall into that category. I'm not happy with it.
Mark, 1 to 5.
If empathy and compassion were not part of that formula, I'd give it a 3. But because empathy, compassion are part of that formula, or definitely should be part of that formula, I'd give them a stellar, at best, 4.5.
Okay. Thanks, Mark. Neil, what's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, and what was 6? I'll give him a 6.
And I agree with Neil, that's 6 as well. I'd give him a 6 as well. So, yes, I agree. The advocates are unanimous in that the Dilworth Redress program, I think, doesn't meet the needs of the survivors. Look, thank you, advocates, for taking the time out today for today's roundtable. Gratefully appreciated. I think we did a very good job of letting the Dilworth Trust Board know that we don't approve of their redress program. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks for all your efforts, mate.
Yep.
No worries.
Thank you.
All right.
If Isabella Dilworth was alive today, she would